Hey, this is Chris from Hacker Philosophy Weekly. I didn't post anything this week because I was a little busy creating this operator and hunting trade skill program using a whole bunch of things. Hopefully, I can open source it because I think it would be awesome and would help a bunch of people. But I was busy with that. However, in the meantime, there was a good friend of mine and fellow philosopher, Jared Aktinson, over at SpectreOps. Now, he's been releasing these on detection series blogs, and he released one this week while I was working on the trade skill program. And it looks pretty long, and I was like, okay, I'll get to it. I'll read it, and try to provide feedback. But then for some reason today, when I clicked on the article, I saw that you could listen to Medium articles. So for something like this, I was like, well, I haven't read the article yet. Why don't I just like film a reaction video over this article? So it'll take, it's sped up a little bit. So it'll take about 10 minutes to go through, and then I'll probably stop and kind of jabber jaw and stuff. But so maybe a little bit of a longer video, but I think it'll be fun. So, okay, let's get started. Okay, on detection, tactical to function. He had a nice quote from James Gibson here at the beginning. So let's go.
Introduction. Welcome back to the On Detection, Tactical to Functional blog series. I want to take a slightly different approach to things in this post. Most of the previous articles in the series have been purely technical in focus. I hope that this post maintains this technical feel, but I feel it is time to do semantical house cleaning. The goal is to leverage the technical foundation we've established throughout the series to help answer this question. Over the past few months, I've observed an increased focus on procedures, as in the P of the acronym TTP, as being the optimal level of analysis and detection engineering.
So one thing I've mentioned and I've talked to Jared about is a lot of the reasons like why operators and hunters do what they do. So quite often, when I've spoken to people in the field, or during an interview, or trying to help people prep for interviews, you can always ask them like, hey, why do you do ops? And they'll typically say because they're fun, right? So Jared's really trying to get to the heart of like, yeah, we're making detections, but why? Like, what's the process behind them? There's been a bunch of philosophers throughout history that have studied war and tactics. John Boyd being one of them, and he started asking these questions like, why do people do the things that they do? And if you can understand it, then you can make it better. You can build a process around it. Okay.
As a result, I felt the need to consider whether I agree with the proposition that we should focus our detection efforts on procedures. However, I ran into an issue each time I tried to provide my perspective. I didn't know what a procedure was. When I look at the MITRE ATT and CK matrix, it is easy to understand that tactics are the column headers. Things like persistence, credential access, lateral movement, and techniques are each individual.
Yeah, so these are the how, right? So something I've noticed as well, when you're going through the MITRE attack matrix, really that whole enterprise matrix is just the how. That's it. It doesn't give you the what or the why.
Individual cell, things like Kerber roasting, OS credential dumping, etc. But then we kind of hand wave away procedures as being everything below the technique. I've seen procedures defined as tools, specific command lines, steps in an attack, and different things. It appears that there are actually two questions hidden in this proposition. First, the ontological question: what do you think a procedure is? Second,
Yes. What do you think it is? And then I haven't read, but I wonder if his next question is, why do you think it's important? Let's see.
Second, the practical question: do you think that procedures are the optimal target of detection engineering efforts? Initially,
Okay. So definitely getting into the core of it would be, what do you think a procedure is, right? The TTP, the P, and the procedure. And do you think that procedures are the optimal target of detection engineering efforts? So basically, do detection engineers exist to make procedures, or are procedures the result of detection engineers existing?
I intended for this post to answer both questions, but the initial draft was 5,000 words, and frankly, I'm not sure anyone would stick with me for that long in one sitting.
That's very astute, Jared, which is why I'm having this read to me instead of reading it myself. So, I've been there. I've written some really long articles, and it's good stuff, and it's really kind of hard to present them. It takes a certain kind of person to want to read something that long.
Instead, I decided to answer each question individually in subsequent articles. In this article, I plan to use the technical work we've put in during the previous 6 posts to explain precisely how I define the term procedure. Then we will build on that topic in the next post to understand whether procedures are, in fact, the optimal target for detection engineers. Why is the
Cool. I like that. Interested in this article. It's kind of touches on, the core philosophy that I'm interested in. Yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes. I like it so far.
Why is the term procedure so ill-defined? In 1931, the Polish-American scientist Alfred Korzybski published a paper that included the statement, "The map is not the territory." Squared, this phrase is a metaphor that examines the relationship between the model we use to see the world, the map, and the world itself, the territory.
Yeah, I've said something similar when talking about red team operators and the differences between like being a red team operator and a hacker. And I think that this quote is kind of touching on the same point, right? When you define something, you make a map out of it. You define you define the area which you can operate. But it's not the entirety of it. But a lot of times people can get focused on that, right? So if Jared's talking about the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, and it's truly just the how behind these things, people can get focused on that. They can see the MITRE ATT&CK matrix and say, okay, this is the realm that I operate inside of, and that's just what I'm going to do.
The territory. This is a fascinating relationship because the world is far too complex for us to perceive completely, so our map must necessarily be lower resolution than the world. However, we would hope that our map roughly approximates reality such that it has utility for problem solving. If it tells us that Fresno is between Los Angeles and Sacramento, we should expect that Fresno is actually between the other 2 cities. If it is not, then our decision making is compromised.
Okay. Kind of touching on some OODA loop stuff here a little bit, but that's cool. And I do agree. The attack matrix it is a framework, and I am happy that it exists. I want to make sure, and I think Jared is going along the same path. We want to make sure that people don't see that as the only solution, or as there's nothing outside the borders of the map that is the attack matrix.
Compromised. This means that our map should be low resolution enough to comprehend it while simultaneously high resolution enough, detailed, to enable us to make accurate predictions when faced with uncertainty. I believe that one of the significant issues in the subdiscipline of detection and response is that our map is too low resolution to use to make sound and accurate predictions. Our perception of the world is shaped by the frame of reference through which we interact with it.
Nice. Nice to see my thoughts echoed in another philosopher as well. The way I feel about it, right? Not necessarily my thoughts, because it's not like I came up with this stuff on my own, but it's nice to see it echoed elsewhere. I do feel like cyber has some soul searching to do. It's a couple articles I've written. My DEF CON talk was very similar to that. It's nice to see it elsewhere.
Imagine that we have been trained our entire career to view the cyber world through a 3-layered lens: tactics, techniques, and procedures. As a result, we apprehend the cyber world as something composed of 3 layers and tend to be limited to thinking and talking. But I repeat myself about it within this 3-layer construct. Through this blog series, I have attempted to shed this preconceived structure to explore the ontological structure of this world, or at least estimate it as well as I can. The result has been interesting for me, and I hope for you as well, because we have discovered the existence of at least 6 layers: functions, operations, procedures, sub-techniques, techniques, and tactics. Consider what must occur when one
And I would even say that there's a 7th, which would be the strategy or the philosophy behind why something is the way it is. So you have your functions, operations, procedures, sub-techniques, techniques, and tactics. Those all need to get rolled up into another thing, which would be the strategy behind it, the center of gravity. Those things those 6 items all have a center of gravity for something. What is that something? And I think that you can answer that. That's different for each profession. Like, that center of gravity may be different for red team operators than it would be for detection engineers or hunters.
The result has been interesting for me, and I hope for you as well, because we have discovered the existence of at least 6 layers: functions, operations, procedures, sub-techniques, techniques, and tactics. Consider what must occur when one attempts to view 6 layers through a 3-layered map. The resolution with which one views the world must necessarily be reduced. The nuance and complexity of those 6 layers are lost or compressed into the 3-layer frame of reference. In some cases.
So I do agree to some aspects of that. It's okay to disagree with other philosophers. I like the 6-layered approach to a 3-layered map. It shows that the scope of the profession is greater than the box that has been drawn around it. of that I agree with. The resolution must necessarily be reduced. That's having a high level overview is okay. It's good to have that low resolution because it lets you see more. Like if I'm, there's a reason there's 4 different types of maps in Minecraft, right? Like there's the super in the weeds one, and then there, map number 4 is like a whole section, right? Tons of blocks. Each of them have their own uses. I don't really use the first map that much, and I use the low resolution map more than I use the high resolution map, the one that's really zoomed in. I generally just need to know where I'm going, right? So the miter attack matrix is good for that. It generally can kind of tell you where you need to be going, but it can't be the only map that you use. So maybe there exists a solution in which there's a 3-layer map and a 6-layer map, and they work together.
In some cases, this loss of detail might be spread throughout all 3 layers of the model, TTP, but in this case, it seems that the first 2 layers, tactics and techniques, are well aligned to the first 2 layers in the 6-layer model. This means that all of the loss is realized at the procedure level specifically. This is because the 3-layer model's version of procedures is responsible for representing the 6-layer model's concept of sequences of operations, and functions. While we all have our own unique maps or perspective with which we view the problem, I hope that this journey to increase the resolution and detail of my map has the side effect of informing your map, so we are better off as an industry. It is time to unshackle procedure from the burden of representing multiple layers and allow it to take its rightful place within the emergent hierarchical structure we've uncovered.
Okay, let's go back and dissect that. So the 3-layered model version is responsible for representing the 6-layer model. We all have our own unique maps. I agree with that, and I think that that's one of the problems, right? We all have our own unique maps, and our true north on our version of our map is not the same as the true north of somebody else's map. And for me, that is the biggest problem I am trying to help fix, is so that each map is oriented to a true north for all of cybersecurity. And we're nowhere near close to that right now. That's kind of what I was at least trying to start to help with my DEF CON talk. Damn the exploits, defining naval fleet tactics to cyber operations. That was all about the compass. But I think what Jared's talking about here in his own detection series is redefining the map. So I do think that the two go together. And I'm happy that I've gotten a chance to talk to him about these things.
What is a procedure? What does the military say? To answer the question, what is a procedure? I think it is essential to understand where the term originated. Where did the information security field pick up the tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTP, concept? As is common in our specialty, it stems from the military, so it may be worth consulting them, at least the US DoD, to better understand the intended purpose. My colleague, Robbie Winchester, at RobWinchester3 on Twitter, explored the idea of procedures in his What is a TT blog post, cubed, referring to Department of Defense Joint Publication 1202, Department of Defense Dictionary of Military and Associated Terms, for the official definitions of each term.
Okay. Since the automated speech reader guy just kind of blew through a whole bunch of DoD nomenclature, what we're getting ready to talk about now is the Dictionary of Military Associated Terms to define what a TTP is.
JP 1202 defines procedures as the specific detailed instructions and or directions for accomplishing a task. This definition is helpful but doesn't clarify precisely where procedures fit into the overall structure of things we've begun to uncover.
So what's good about this is the TTPs, right, according to the military definition, is how you do something, which is exactly what the minor attack matrix is. It is nothing more than how something is done. Again, it doesn't describe why those things need to be done, why they are important, and it doesn't describe the what that comes after it. It doesn't describe the impact or what happens if you do or do not do these things.
Uncover. Robbie goes further in his post to provide a metaphor about car ownership that we can use to better understand the idea. He labels high-level considerations like providing fuel, cleaning the interior, and preventative maintenance as examples at the tactic level. He then changes focus to the preventative maintenance tactic and explores the techniques that achieve this tactical objective. Examples provided include changing the oil, rotating tire, and replacing the brakes. The last level of analysis is procedures, where one would expect detailed instructions and or directions to implement a technique like changing the oil. 5 To correctly interpret this definition, we must first understand what is meant by detailed instructions and or direction.
Yep, again, so it's all about the how. By going to the dictionary, it literally spells it out. TTPs are how you do something. I no longer have to guess about that. That's just was my thoughts. I'm glad Jared brought it up that there's a dictionary reference for that.
My thought process. One option for interpretation is that it could mean something as specific as run this tool with this command line. However, I believe there is a technical issue that prevents this interpretation. So far, all the different concepts we've discussed are categories. You can think of them as classes in object-oriented programming, or you can think of them as Platonic forms. I prefer this interpretation. These forms are not concrete or tangible. Instead, they are patterns that must be instantiated in order to exist in the world. Tools are the instantiation of the class or the form. For an attacker to execute.
Just backing up a little bit, the Platonic forms, that's something Jared's trying to like school me on right now. It seems pretty cool. It's awesome discourses and just different ways of thinking about different topics. What's interesting, I saw wrote, they are patterns that must be instantiated in order to exist in the world. Now, John Boyd, I'm reading a book on him right now. He wrote something called Patterns of Conflict, and it was one of his most widely sought after briefs. And a lot of that came from the philosophy around warfare and the strategies that were used. It helped create the OODA loop. So it's cool to see Jared talk about patterns too. And it's making me think that I really need to go do a deep dive into patterns of conflict just so I can understand it more. Because a lot of the philosophy that I've drawn inspiration from has actually been military stuff. Just the way the warfighter, the generalship, they think about how to accomplish problems. I found really good correlations and strategy by incorporating those into cyber.
Tools are the instantiation of the class or the form. For an attacker to execute a technique, they must instantiate the form through a tool. Tools are simply idiosyncratic instantiations of the technique, not the technique itself. To me, procedures belong to the forms, not the instances. The procedures are the pattern of steps to execute, not the execution of the steps. Therefore, it seems that the detailed instructions aspect of the procedure definition might look something like the list below. Enumerate processes to obtain the process identifier for lsas.exe. Open a handle to lsas.exe with the process_vm_read access right. Read the memory of lsas.exe to obtain the credentials stored within.
So Jared's talking about the procedure. I wonder if he's going to go on to describe why this procedure is important, like the impact and why. Pattern of steps to execute, not the execution of the steps. So maybe the pattern would be enumerate a process, so search, open a handle, investigate, read the memory. So search, investigate, analyze. Search, investigate. Kind of sounds like the OODA loop maybe.
Within. The vital point here is not the steps, it is what the steps represent. Notice that each step corresponds with an operation that we've discussed previously. Step 1 corresponds with the process enumerate operation. Step 2 corresponds with the process access operation. And step 3 corresponds with the process read operation. The steps define a sequence of operations that implements a sub-technique. Specifically, the sequence of operations that is instantiated by Mimikatsu's squirrel::logon passwords command.6. As I mentioned in the introduction.
Well, that's really awesome that the synth voice handled the Mimikatz thing, so I'm pretty impressed with that. I really don't want to move to Medium because I have all my Substack stuff, but having this auto reader is awesome.
As I mentioned in the introduction, I've, until now, found it difficult to pin down exactly what a procedure is or at least should be. I feel that the structure that we've uncovered throughout this series finally provides the foundation to allow me to state precisely what I believe a procedure is. My answer is that a procedure is not a tool or a command line argument. A procedure is a sequence of operations that, when combined, implement a technique or sub-technique.
Let's see. A procedure is a sequence of operations that, when combined, implement a technique or a sub-technique. How would I... implement a technique or a sub-technique? Could it be that a procedure is the implementation of a how, or a procedure is the implementation of a why? Okay, I'm gonna noodle on that one for a little bit. Maybe he'll answer it or go deep dive a little bit more later in the article.
Comparing the definition to the operation graph. We can now apply this definition to our analysis of the operation graph for LSAS memory dumping that we discussed in the previous post, 7 and that is shown below as figure 1. This.
All right, I gotta pause here. Let me look at this thing. Process enumerate, process access, snapshots, handle, process read, process creates, LSAS memory operation graph. Okay.
graph shows 4 unique sequences of operations that can be used to accomplish the sub-technique. Based on our new definition for procedures, these 4 sequences of operations are procedures. The ontological hierarchy. This series has
So those four sequences of operations are procedures, but are they like, can they all 4 of them be combined into a single procedure? If you combine things of a procedure, do they become a technique? If you combine the procedures, do they become the why? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's see if this will just pick up where I left off.
Explored the ontological hierarchy of things in the cyber world. We talked about the function call stack, 8 identified the functions called by mimicots, 9 abstracted functions into operations, superscript 1 0 combined them to make function call graphs, superscript 1 observed how operations can be connected as procedures, and how numerous procedures exist that can fulfill the requirements of a given subtechnique. Superscript 1 squared. While each of these concepts can hopefully stand alone, I have found it helpful to generate a graphic that visualizes the hierarchical relationship between these concepts and demonstrates that they fit together to form a coherent structure.
Yeah, so here's the image, and I could try to zoom in on it, but it's just gonna let's see if I can. Attack, tactic. Can you even zoom in even more without ruining my OBS here? Okay. Crap. Conceptual taxonomy structure from tactical to the functional. Okay, let's go on. Let's see if this will, maybe there's a higher res version, or maybe I suck.
The image is shared as figure 2. Note, for brevity's sake, and because I have yet to do the work, this hierarchical image only expands one node at each level. Imagine that each node at each level has a relatively similar number of options that it abstracts. Hopefully, this allows you to imagine the sheer extent of the possibilities available to attackers. The image shows the different levels of abstraction that are simultaneously occurring. So when someone chooses to run mimikot scroll logon passwords to dump credentials, it is simultaneously true that they are executing kernel 32 read process memory superscript 1 cubed, function, process read, operation, direct memory access, procedure, LSAS memory superscript 1.4, subtechnique, OS credential dumping superscript 1.5, technique, and credential access superscript 1.6, tactic. The nested structure.
Yeah, so that's good. That is an additional taxonomy of how to build things. From a cyber hacker philosophical standpoint, I do question, how does that become useful in operations? Just because I know what the taxonomy is, what is it that Jared's thinking how this can expand cyber operations? Are we going to be able to think differently, or are we going to be able to map different ways of thinking? Will our frame of reference grow, or will those borders kind of disappear? Something I'll have to think about even more. I wonder if he'll answer it.
Structure of things. The quote that opened this post was written by James J. Gibson in his book The Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. What I love about it, especially in this context, is that it helps us to see that this nested structure is not unique to this particular use case. The nested structure is present in everything we interact with daily. Just as Gibson observed, the cell is nested within the leaf within the branch within the tree within the canyon, and the canyon within the mountain. Superscript 1.7 We can observe that the function implements the operation. Operations can be combined to implement the procedure implements the subtechnique implements the technique implements the tactic, and tactics are integrated to implement the attack chain.
Okay, I think I understand now. Where he's going with this, I think how it will help is to remove the borders of the map. We currently have a very limited map. It's lower resolution. And if you want to dig deep onto many things and maybe think about how different types of attacks could be combined the way that like an AI would, an AI is going to think differently than a human will. There's tons of examples about how AIs have game systems, like if it tries to play soccer against itself, it'll kick the ball into its own goal so that it gets to take a shot from half field or something, so that it has a better chance of getting a ball in the enemy's goal or the other team's goal. So it's stuff that like we normally wouldn't think about. We will be able to do, I think, if this taxonomy gets further pushed out and just generates other people to start thinking differently about just how deep the attack rabbit hole goes.
Put another, more explicit way, functions represent the base level of the structure, at least thus far. Functions are interesting because they are about as tangible as things get within the context of software. They represent the doors through which an application can interact with the operating system and the associated hardware. We then discovered that functions implement operations. Operations are the first level of abstraction in our structure. They are beneficial because numerous functions can be used to achieve the same operational result. For instance, both kernel 32 read process memory and NTDLL read virtual memory implements the process read operation. Operations are interesting because, in some sense, they form the basic building blocks of applications. Programs basically combine individual operations to accomplish tasks. Based on the conclusion of this article, when operations are combined to achieve a technical objective, they become procedures.
Now we're starting to hit on the why. When operations are combined to achieve technical objective, they become procedures. Well, I guess that's more the what. For me personally, I'm still missing the why. I guess the why Jared would do something like this is to further redefine the field, to remove the boundaries so that people can think differently and start combining different procedures and thinking in terms of this is an implementation of this type of attack, this mindset. And if you can find patterns in that type of attack, maybe that will lead to identifying similar patterns in other types of attacks that weren't known before.
Procedure. For instance, we saw that Mimicots combines the process enumerate, process access, and process read operations to dump credentials from LSAS. This leads us to understand the procedures implement a technique or a sub-technique. The aforementioned procedure implements the LSAS memory sub-technique, but it is essential to remember that there is often more than one procedure for any given technique or sub-technique. Sub-techniques, when applicable, are specific manifestations of techniques, like OS credential dumping. Techniques ultimately are implementations of tactics. For instance, OS credential dumping is one technique that implements the credential access tactic. Lastly, attackers can combine and order tactics to achieve their overall objectives. Our prior work now provides a coherent structure allowing us to connect the abstract tactical layer to the concrete functional layer. Specifically, we have language that enables precise speech when discussing these ideas.
What's important about having the precise speech, and it's something that I'm working through personally, I don't know why my light keeps going off. Come on. I'm gonna try this one. Maybe it'll stop going off. Okay, so what's cool about having the language is we're working on something similar right now. Like we have an AI red team, and that means 1,000 different things depending on who you talk to. If you go talk to MITRE, it may mean, oh, an AI red team, we have Atlas, like that, the MITRE attack matrix for AI. Here's your common lexicon for that. But if you go to somebody like DARPA or another company that also has a bunch of data scientists, they're going to hear adversarial AI and think it's something else. So part of our main mission right now is to establish a common language so that we can say, we being the community can say, this is what an AI red team is, and here's what it does, here's why it does it, and here's what it accomplishes. And what Jared is talking about, from my perspective, is that we need a better language set. We need a better way to speak. And it needs to be common, and it needs to be pushed out everywhere. And once everyone can speak this new language, it will change the way that they think, because language does control thinking, controls the way that a person thinks. So by pushing this out, I think we are on the cusp of perhaps a philosophical revolution, I would think. That's my take on it. It's wrapping this all up, which I applaud. The why behind this is to establish a common language to enable better thinking at a broad scale.
Ideas. Conclusion. I hope my explorations of the hierarchy, as I see it, allow for expanding the language used to discuss these details and increasing the definitional resolution of specific terms currently in our lexicon, like procedures. Whether you agree with my new/refined use of procedures or not, I hope you can at least appreciate my attempt to define a term that, based on my observations, we universally agree is overly broad by giving it specific technical meaning. Either way, I will use procedures to mean a sequence of operations that, when combined, implement a technique or sub-technique in my future posts, presentations, and Twitter debates. I'd like to leave you with a parting thought.
That's awesome, Jared. One thing I would recommend, if you decide to ever watch this, was that if you're going to use that new language, you have to make sure that people know how to find the dictionary. So maybe something you want to post on like your public profile, like, hey, check out these cool new terms. Like here's the Jared Aktinson dictionary. Please reference it when speaking to me. Okay, let's go.
Either way, I will use procedures to mean a sequence of operations that, when combined, implement a technique or sub-technique in my future posts, presentations, and Twitter debates. I'd like to leave you with a parting thought. I'm going to ask you a question about figure 3 below, and for this experiment to work, you mustn't read the next paragraph until after you have answered the question. This should not be a hard requirement to meet. When you look at this image, what object do you see?
Oh man, I'm a little bit biased because I just read the OODA Loop article where John Boyd talks about those different images and how you can take apart everything and make a snowmobile out of them. Okay. When I look at this image, what do I see? My first reaction would be a race car. My second reaction would be home, because I grew up in Indianapolis in the 500, so the Indy cars. My third reaction would be an energy drink. My fourth reaction would be a race. My fifth reaction would be sponsorship. Let's see how Jared's going to nail me.
You see, there is a concept in social psychology called experiential hierarchies. This idea focuses on the categorical nesting of things. Different subjects can apprehend an individual object at different levels within the hierarchy. It is possible to interpret the object in the image at different levels of abstraction. For instance, it is simultaneously an object, a vehicle, a car, a race car, a Formula One race car, a Red Bull Racing Formula One race car, and Max Verstappen's Red Bull Racing Formula One race car. Each level increases the resolution with which one considers the object. 2 questions that I want you to consider between now and my next post are: why did you choose the level you did? Is there an optimal hierarchical level at which you should view things?
Why did I choose the level I did? Number one, I thought it was a trick question. It wasn't. No, I do think I was probably influenced by the OODA Loop stuff, and I wanted to do abstraction. I meant what I said about the Minecraft maps. I generally stick to the most highest resolution map, because I just need to know where I'm going. Once I get there, I'll handle things on my own. Now, each of the resolutions of the maps do have their purpose. I just don't use them. So for me, I saw a race car. It was simple. It was obvious. That's what it is. It's a race car. It's a car that races. I could tell that because it was on a racetrack, and I have seen things before to tell me that was a race car. Why I thought of home? Well, that was honestly because I was looking at the track behind it. That's kind of where I grew up. So, and then each one got more specific. So yeah, it was a super high resolution. Just identify the thing, and then we can drill down to it. And I guess that's maybe what I did a little bit. It was like race car, and then I got super abstract with home. And then I said, what did I say? Energy drink, because I saw Red Bull. That's what I thought of. And then sponsorship. So the sponsorship would be directly related to the race car. So 3 high-level abstractions, and then I started getting deeper to it. But no, that was a cool article. Everything that I got out of this, if I was just to edit this down to one 1-minute clip, it would be, I feel like Jared wrote that article to tell everyone it's time to establish a language, and that's here's how he's going to do it. And I hope that other people use it. I will. It's going to be hard to get away from TTPs, right, to go into the specifics of procedures. I'm definitely focused a lot more currently on the cerebral side of things, the why behind a procedure. And I hope that maybe we can work together as a community or something more to just answer, here's the how, here's why a procedure works, and here's why a procedure exists. Something similar I talked about with my Soul of the Hammer article. So cool. Thank you. That was really fun for me. I liked Medium's, read to me thing. I think we'll probably do that in the future. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the article. So thanks, Jared. You can find links for his article, his information and stuff in the description for this video, and just a couple other things. The John Boyd book, I'll probably go find the Patterns of Conflict article and link that there, and hopefully put it on my list of things to read soon. So thank you.